Good evening to you from Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Regan Devines. A look at this evening's headlines. Bridging the gap with Havana, the leader of the world's Catholic community arrives in Washington after 3 days in Cuba. A second day of clashes as Mexican police blocked the path of Ayotzinapa protesters. And it not only tastes good, it can help combat deforestation. Brazil's Amazon branches out into chocolate production. All these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you so much for being here with us on From the South. We begin in the United States, where Pope Francis has begun his long-anticipated visit to Washington and New York as well as Philadelphia. The Pope landed at Andrews Air Force Base outside the U.S. Capitol just a few hours ago. He was welcomed there by President Barack Obama and his family. Expectations are high for this, his first visit to the most powerful country on the planet. Many are hoping and expecting that Francis will continue to deliver his messages in defense of the poor, against greed and consumerism, and for action on social inclusion, climate change, and a range of other issues. On the flight from Cuba, Francis spoke directly about the U.S. blockade on the island.
El problema del bloqueo es parte de las negociaciones. Es público esto, ¿cierto? Ambos presidentes se han...
I think it would be normal for there to be some reference to this process, as there was here in Cuba. I'm sure there will be some reference to it in the United States as well, because it is an important issue and a current one, and he will want to give hope.
And our correspondent Bianca Perez has more from Washington.
We are in front of the Apostolic Nunciature, where Pope Francis was received by hundreds who have gathered here to sing and praise the Holy Father as he makes his way into the Nunciature, and of course will remain there for the rest of the evening and for the remainder of the 48-hour period in which he will be staying in Washington, D.C. The Holy Father will begin his official agenda tomorrow morning in a meeting with President Barack Obama early in the morning in the White House. He will then be conducting the canonization of Junipero Serra in the afternoon in the Basilica, and then on Thursday morning will of course be addressing a joint session of Congress in which he will talk about different social issues. Among these, of course, poverty, war, and end to our environmental disasters that have been occurring. And due to these meetings with both Congress and the President of the United States, there have been many protests in Washington, D.C. asking His Holiness to be their voice, to be the person that will carry this message to the U.S. government. From Washington, D.C., for Telesur, Bianca Perez. Workers are finishing up the last details at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, the location that will host the most important religious event set to take place during Pope Francis' visit to the nation's capital, the canonization of Junipero Serra, a Spanish missionary who brought the gospel to the United States.
He is the parish priest of the world. His gestures, his words, his caress of people has touched people in 2.5 years in a way that I cannot remember. So with this great anticipation and excitement for Pope Francis here in Washington, Philadelphia, and New York.
Faithful Catholics are also excited for his arrival. Many are willing to use any means necessary in order to see His Holiness.
Well, I expect a lot of people. I expect a lot of energy. Many of us will have to get out and walk. I have a ticket to the Mass, so I know I'm planning to come on Metro.
Washington, D.C.'s Metro Rail has warned delays up to 2 hours long can be expected for the length of the Pope's visit. Businesses and residents are expecting road closures and traffic delays. Some companies near the Pope's scheduled events are even allowing their employees to work from home.
My office is right next to where the church is, where he's speaking, so we're working from home on Thursday. They're keeping the offices closed. Just trying to keep as many people off the road as possible because I think it's going to be a lot of delays.
An estimated 50,000 Latinos will be present in Washington, D.C. during the papal visit.
Many of them have traveled from other countries to join #WalkWithFrancis, an initiative that hopes to raise 100,000 pledges in support of the Pope's messages. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
There have been positive reactions in both Venezuela and Colombia regarding the agreement of the 7-point plan to deal with the crisis on the border between the two countries. Presidents Nicolas Maduro and Juan Manuel Santos of Colombia agreed late on Monday to work for a progressive normalization of the border region. The meeting in Quito was their first since the beginning of the crisis on August 19th. The talks were mediated by the presidents of Uruguay and Ecuador, Tabaré Vázquez and Rafael Correa, respectively. The latter read a joint statement explaining the points agreed upon.
Los presidentes de Colombia y Venezuela acordaron: 1. El retorno inmediato de los respectivos.
The presidents of Colombia and Venezuela agreed, first, the immediate return of their ambassadors.
2. Realizar una investigación.
Second, to conduct an investigation into the border situation. Third, to immediately bring together teams of ministers to address the sensitive border issues. This meeting will take place on the 23rd in Caracas. Fourth, the progressive normalization of the border. Fifth, the coexistence of the economic, social, and political models of each country. Sixth, a call on the spirit of brotherhood and unity, promoting a climate of mutual respect and coexistence. Seventh, to continue working with the accompaniment of Ecuador and Uruguay.
The presidents of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, also expressed their satisfaction with the talks.
Ha sido una reunión muy franca, muy clara.
The meeting was very frank, very clear. We could also say that it has been a meeting within a climate with no doubt of brotherhood. This is how I feel. Who won today? Common sense, dialogue, and what always needs to succeed, peace.
¿Quién triunfó hoy? Yo entiendo perfectamente.
I understand perfectly the fears of the government of Venezuela about the criminal gangs, about the mafias embedded in the border, who take advantage of our differences to commit their crimes. And we hope to fight those mafias, and the best way to do it is by doing it together.
A high-level delegation from Venezuela is hoping to boost relations with the English-speaking Caribbean's second-largest country, Trinidad and Tobago. Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez, together with the Ministers of Finance and of Oil and Mining, were the first senior representatives of a foreign government to visit Trinidad and Tobago's new Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, after he and his party won the island's general elections 2 weeks ago.
Tanto del primer ministro de Trinidad y Tobago como el presidente de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, el presidente Nicolás Maduro.
I think this shows the commitment of both Prime Minister Rowley and President Maduro. They talked to each other and then instructed their respective teams to get to work as quickly as possible. 4 days later, here we are in Trinidad and Tobago, aiming to put our relations on a new footing. And we've already agreed on culture, energy, and trade.
The Venezuelan finance minister said the two countries are discussing possible gas exports to Trinidad.
Trade is fundamental, exchanging products as well as services. Such trade between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago is very important for diversifying our economy and for the important substitution that President Maduro has been talking about. We also have an extremely interesting project for the export of gas to Trinidad and Tobago.
Relatives and peers of the 43 students who were disappeared in Ayotzinapa, Mexico, clashed with police in Guerrero for the second day in a row. The clashes began when some 200 police officers blocked the group, who was traveling on a dozen buses to reach the capital of the state, Chilpancingo. Some students threw Molotov cocktails in response to tear gas shot by the police. 5 officers and 2 students were injured, and a truck was set on fire.
We have to go to Mexico. If the state and federal government think that they will silence us or that this will stop us, they are wrong. We are going to do everything that's needed. because it's already been 1 year of psychological, physical, and emotional torment for the parents.
And still in Mexico, the left-leaning party, the PRD, has decided to seek electoral alliances with its ideological opposite, the National Action Party, or PAN. The decision was taken by the Democratic Revolution Party in Mexico City over the weekend. They approved alliances with the PAN under certain conditions and for specific purposes only. The PRD also approved a resolution on the Ayotzinapa students, demanding accountability for those responsible inside the party. The mayor of Iguala, where the students disappeared, was a member of the PRD when the events took place. Now we go to Colombia. That's where different reactions have followed the latest FARC statement, in which the guerrilla group announced its readiness to become a legal political movement if a peace agreement is finally reached with the government. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita has more.
Her colleagues from the leftist Patriotic Union Party were being assassinated one after the other. The death threats became so unbearable that Imelda had to flee with her 3 children. After almost 30 years of exile in Sweden, she has now returned, hoping that Colombia's peace process might bring the political guarantees she never had before.
We need to push the government to comply with that commitment. We cannot let ourselves be cornered or intimidated. We need to make use of our rights and insistently and urgently demand from the government the guarantees to develop our political activities. And the insurgency should do the same once they reintegrate into civilian life.
Patriotic Union was itself the product of peace negotiations back in the 80s. Then it was exterminated by paramilitary and state violence. Now that the FARC have said they are ready to become a political party, Patriotic Union members wonder whether this time the government is really ready to provide the necessary guarantees.
The necessary measures do not exist yet, and that is problematic in such a violent country as ours, where death threats are constant, and those threats are coming from the same paramilitary structures that continue to operate with help from within the state. The state must establish a very clear policy that it will never again support paramilitary groups.
For those that once took up arms and have already demobilized, the dismantling of paramilitarism is a must, but so is the guarantee of political participation, which is precisely one of the negotiation points in Havana.
Those guarantees are absolutely necessary to prevent new massacres against social movements or the political leaders that will result from the peace accords with the insurgency. And that's where civil society should also play a central role in making sure that those necessary conditions and guarantees will be in fact fulfilled.
For social leaders, the FARC latest statement brings Colombians one step closer to achieving peace, a process that requires tolerance towards all the different positions that will eventually emerge on the country's political spectrum. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
The Brazilian real dropped to a minimum 4.03 to the dollar within minutes of the market's opening. This year, the Brazilian currency has depreciated a total of 33%, heightening fears about a deepening economic crisis. President Dilma Rousseff seems to be having difficulties in putting in place a plan to revive the economy. Brazil's economy entered a recession in the second quarter of the year, and the government announced a massive $17 billion austerity package in a bid to boost its ailing economy. The slide in the currency comes a day after the former treasurer of the ruling Workers' Party, João Vacari, was sentenced to more than 15 years in prison for his part in the Petrobras corruption scandal. Vacari was found guilty of money laundering and conspiracy. He was the party's treasurer until April this year and was accused of receiving bribes from Petrobras contractors in return for inflated contracts. The bribes were then allegedly used by party members. Petrobras estimates that it lost about $2 billion in the scheme. And Argentina's stock market felt the real's depreciation and fell 8.46%. Stocks of Brazil's oil giant Petrobras were down 13.92% on its neighbor's stock market. Banks and finance companies were also hit hard. On a brighter note, Brazilian cocoa producers are trying to make progress in the chocolate business. Cocoa trees are a great alternative for reforestation in the Amazon, and the government encourages its production. Banana and ace fruit trees can also be planted alongside cocoa trees. Pará state has suffered extensive deforestation for cattle farming and logging industries.
Alors, il y a une plus grande diversité, il y a probablement des arômes beaucoup plus intéressants.
There's greater diversity and probably more interesting flavors in the Amazon region. This is the cradle. It's where cacao is born. There's great potential which the government is promoting, and the producers and entrepreneurs are fighting for recognition.
Et les gens, les entrepreneurs en train.
For years, inadequate forensic capabilities have hampered the ability of countries of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States to solve crime. Now, St. Lucia is vowing to ensure that its forensic lab is fully operational and able to help regional islands that may not possess a facility. From St. Lucia, our correspondent Alison Kentish has the details in this report.
Crime investigation is just one area in which the 9 members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS grouping, depend on each other for support. When St. Lucia commissioned its National Forensic Lab in 2009, it was meant to offer services to the other islands which do not have labs of their own. However, that lab has been plagued with issues for the past few years, and samples have to be sent to Barbados and Jamaica for testing, making crime solving a lengthy process. St. Lucia's National Security Minister is hoping that change is coming soon.
We had some intervention from the government of Barbados. We had an expert. That expert, in fact, as I speak with you today, that expert is again on the ground in St. Lucia. That expert has been on the ground doing ongoing work to ensure that the lab is restored to a place of confidence. I cannot tell you much more except to say that as a result of the intervention of that expert, we have found some substantial weaknesses that we knew before the expert was there, but she has confirmed the existence of those weaknesses. We have also said to the expert that we...
A leading pathologist and independent senator, Dr. Stephen King, is calling for improved forensics to help expedite trials in the criminal justice system. Dr. King says the delays in processing cases are particularly worrying.
There's an issue of adequate storage for forensic samples. That can be addressed and should be addressed urgently. Also, to improve the timeliness of the test requests from the police, the sample transport, and the production of the analytical report. In other words, we need to have everybody engaged actively in this process, everybody pushing for what is right, justice, truth, and charity. Do your job, do it expeditiously, and get the evidence in such that people can have their trials in a rapid time.
There has been debate over the operations of the lab and the use of forensic science in solving crimes and securing convictions in the court. Critics, including a forensic scientist, say the facility is not being used efficiently in the prosecution of cases, both locally and regionally. Experts in the criminal justice system say ensuring that the forensic lab is fully functional is critical to solving crime not just in St. Lucia, but in the other OECS islands as well. From the forensic lab in Tapio, St. Lucia, Alison Kentish, Telesur.
After weeks of pressure from the campaign of Bernie Sanders to her left, Hillary Clinton has finally come out against the Keystone XL oil pipeline. The leading candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination has seen her standard in the polls slip sharply in recent months. She told a campaign rally in Iowa that she hadn't expressed an opinion earlier because she wanted to respect President Obama's decision-making process.
I think it is imperative that we look at the Keystone Pipeline as what I believe it is, a distraction from the important work we have to do to combat climate change, and unfortunately, from my perspective, one that interferes with our ability to move forward to deal with all the other issues. Therefore, I oppose it, and I oppose it because I don't think it's in the best interests of what we need to do to combat climate change.
Catalonia is having regional elections this Sunday, elections which are seen as a plebiscite on independence from Spain. Its head of government, Artur Mas, has warned that a unilateral split is inevitable unless the government in Madrid agrees to call a referendum, something it has always opposed. Mas has also said that a political solution based on a new tax deal or a constitutional accommodation is now off the table, and that Spain's constitutional court will not be able to block a declaration of independence as it did last year, banning a referendum on independence. Despite the broad autonomy that Catalonia already enjoys, separatist sentiment has surged in recent years in a context of crisis and cutbacks.
So if this attitude changes in Madrid, we will negotiate with them, we will talk with them, and if the question is, then will you stop the political process in Catalonia? The answer is no, until we have the certainty that we have a specific date on a binding referendum on independence. But I'm very skeptical about this possibility.
Two political leaders of the Basque armed group ETA have been arrested in France. David Pla and Iratzi Sorsabal were arrested in a village in the Pyrenees, one of ETA's strongholds. Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy said that this joint operation completes the decapitation of ETA. Sorsabal had been wanted for at least 10 years, while Pla had been on the run since 2011. Two lower-level members of the ETA were also arrested in the operation. By all accounts, a major aid mission is underway in a Vienna train station in Austria. Over 2,000 volunteers have signed up to the Train of Hope, a campaign to assist refugees that initially started off with just a few friends. The Train of Hope group now has a Facebook page and accepts donations in the form of food, clothing, tents, and medical supplies. Refugees who find a shelter in the train station are given basic supplies to assist them as they search for a permanent home. The recent tension surrounding the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem's Old City is threatening to result in a new Palestinian intifada or uprising. That's according to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. He also called for peace talks between Palestine and Israel to continue. This as the actions of Israeli forces at the mosque have come under further scrutiny over the past weeks.
What is happening is extremely dangerous, and we do not wish for this situation to continue, so that it does not result in chaos and an intifada, which we do not want.
A sit-in protest has set off alarm bells in support of patients of chronic kidney failure in the Gaza Strip. More on this story with Noor Harazin.
The Ministry of Health and the Gaza Strip organized Tuesday morning a sit-in in protest of patients suffering kidney failure at the Ar-Rantisi Hospital in the north of the city. Despite the pain, several patients and their relatives took part in the protest. They appealed to the Palestinian Authority headed by President Mahmoud Abbas and the concerned international health and humanitarian organizations to interfere to save their lives. The director of pharmacy at the ministry, Dr. Munir Al-Bursh, warned earlier that the dialysis treatment offered to about 544 kidney patients in Gaza, including 22 children, is threatened to completely stop due to the lack of machines needed to dialysis sessions.
مسألة الكهرباء التي تتكرر انقطاعها وأنكى من ذلك.
We're suffering fuel shortage, which reached to zero levels more than once, and from repeated power outages, both essential for the operation of the dialysis units. To an extent, they got us very worried about our children. Our stores run out of extremely important medications needed for the kidney dialysis operations for over 2 months now. A lot of children are suffering 5-degree kidney failure and do not take the required medication, which puts them in need of repeated blood transfer. This is a big catastrophe.
هناك أطفال عديدين من يعني عندهم فشل كلوي من الدرجة الخامسة ومع ذلك.
Meanwhile, the health sector in the coastal enclave is witnessing a dire situation in light of the Israeli closure of terminals, the restrictions imposed on the import medical supplies, and the lack of the fuel needed for running hospitals during the power outages. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
And now it's time for our World News Roundup.
Members of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have been meeting in Nigeria to try to resolve the tense standoff between the army and coup leaders in Burkina Faso. Last Thursday, the country's presidential guard said it had seized power in a coup. The ECOWAS talks aim to return the interim government to power ahead of elections on October 11. Due to rising tensions between Turkey's ruling AK party and the PKK, 2 ministers of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party have resigned. Government attacks against Kurdish camps in northern Iraq have continued since the ceasefire ended in July. The German stock index fell 3.8% in a single day, after the United States Environmental Protection Agency recalled 500,000 VW cars on Monday. The scandal started when the cars were found to have a device to cheat the agency, making engines appear 40 times cleaner during emissions testing.
I am infinitely sorry that we have disappointed people's trust. I offer my deepest apologies to our customers, the authorities, and to the public at large for our misconduct.
The leader of France's Conservative National Front, Marine Le Pen, has been charged with inciting racial hatred after she compared Muslims praying in the streets to the Nazi occupation. According to legal sources, her trial will start in October.
And finally this evening, a Middle Eastern play tells the story of a young boy named Ahmed who lives peacefully in an Arab country until war breaks out. He then has to flee for his life. The production mirrors the sentiment of many refugees in real life who have been faced with the life-altering decision to stay and hope for the best in face of a war or to seek refuge in another country. The play is called 1001 Titanics, and according to the director Mahmoud Al-Hurani, it not only sheds through the light on a crisis that has affected millions, but also challenges European perception of the Middle East.
It is a humanitarian play. It talks about the difficult time people go through when the situation in their country is complicated and they contemplate immigration. Sometimes, to escape death, they choose death itself.
And there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We'll see you tomorrow.